My neighbor called me on a Tuesday morning while I was parked outside a Tim Hortons in Sudbury, waiting for a client meeting that wasn't for another 40 minutes. I almost didn't pick up. I didn't recognize the number at first, and I figured it was another insurance robocall. But something made me answer. "Is this Derek?" she said. "Not Derek, Derek." She'd gotten my name off the mailbox. I told her it was. "This is Beverly from across the street, the beige house with the green shutters." She paused. "I don't want to alarm you, but there have been some trucks at your place, a few times now, while you're away. I work in industrial equipment servicing. My territory runs from Sault Ste. Marie down through Sudbury and out to North Bay. Most weeks I leave Sunday evening and I'm not back until Friday night, sometimes Saturday morning if something runs long. I've been doing this for 11 years. I know the 400 the way most people know their own street. My house is in Hanmer, just northeast of Sudbury, a semi-detached bungalow I bought 6 years ago after my marriage ended. I got it for a decent price because the previous owners had let the yard go and the furnace needed replacing. I didn't care. It was mine. I paid every cent of it with early mornings and late drives and hotel breakfasts alone. I asked Beverly what kind of trucks. "White cargo vans mostly," she said. "Once a flatbed. They park in your driveway, go inside, come back out carrying things. Sometimes they stay a couple of hours." I thought maybe you'd hired someone for renovations or something, but it's been happening every week for at least 2 months now. Maybe longer. I sat in that Tim Hortons parking lot for a long time after we hung up. My coffee went cold. I kept trying to find a reasonable explanation and kept coming up empty. I hadn't hired anyone. I hadn't lent anyone a key. I hadn't told anyone I was out of town. Not that it was a secret, but it wasn't exactly something I broadcast either. I thought about my spare key. I keep one in the lockbox on the side of the house, the kind you hang off a fence post. I'd gotten it during a period when my brother was checking on the place sometimes, doing me a favor. That was 3 years ago. After he moved out to Kelowna, I'd never really thought about the lockbox again. The combination hadn't changed. It was the last 4 digits of my old phone number, the one I'd had since my 20s. I sat there doing the math and didn't like what I came up with. That Friday I drove home from North Bay instead of taking the usual route back through Sundridge. I parked 2 streets over, on a cul-de-sac where a row of maples would block my truck from being visible. I walked back to my street and stood near the corner for about 20 minutes, watching nothing. The house looked quiet, but the driveway had tire marks in it that I didn't put there, and there were 2 long scrapes along the edge of the concrete apron that hadn't been there when I left. I went inside. Everything looked normal, mostly. The living room was the same. The kitchen was the same. I almost convinced myself Beverly had been mistaken or had confused my house with someone else's. Then I opened the garage. I don't use my garage for parking. It's a single car space and my truck is too wide, so I'd been storing tools in there, some seasonal stuff. Boxes from the move that I never fully unpacked. But when I opened the side door and hit the light, about a third of my boxes were pushed to one side. There were oil stains on the concrete that weren't there before. Fresh ones. Dark and spreading in a pattern that told me someone had been doing mechanical work in there. Not once. Many times. There was a steel creeper against the wall, the kind you lie on to slide under a vehicle. That was not mine. And in the corner, neatly stacked, were 4 passenger side tires still on their rims, none of which belonged to any vehicle I'd ever owned. I stood there for a long time. My first instinct was to call the police right then. I did call them. The officer who came out was polite, thorough enough, but the situation was complicated. There was no sign of forced entry. The lockbox on the side of the house had my key in it, right where it was supposed to be. I couldn't prove it had been copied. The items in the garage were strange, yes, but without knowing who left them, there wasn't much to work with. He told me to document everything, change my locks, and if I could get a camera up before the next visit, that would help considerably. "What we can't do," he said carefully, "is charge someone with trespassing if we don't know who they are and they appear to have had access." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch because I didn't want to go upstairs until I'd walked every room, and then I was too wound up to actually rest. I went through the whole house with my phone light like I was looking for something I couldn't name. Nothing was obviously missing. My TV was there. My laptop was there. The small amount of cash I keep in the kitchen drawer was untouched. But things had been moved. Small things. The angle of a chair. A dish towel folded differently than I fold dish towels. A single coffee mug in the drying rack that I didn't remember using before I left. Someone had been in my house, not just the garage. In my house, I called my brother in Kelowna that Sunday. I told him what was going on and asked gently as I could whether he'd told anyone the lockbox combination or lent his key to someone. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I lost that key actually, a while back. I meant to tell you and I kept forgetting. I'm sorry, Derek. Lost it. A while back." I asked him what a while back meant. He thought it was maybe 2.5 years ago, possibly 3. He'd had it on a ring with some other keys and the whole thing went missing. He'd assumed it had fallen out of his jacket somewhere. That key had been floating around out there for up to 3 years and I'd never known. I had the locks changed that week. New deadbolt, new door handle, and I had a locksmith look at the lockbox and advise me to remove it entirely, which I did. I also ordered 2 cameras, one covering the front driveway, one covering the side door to the garage, and had them installed before the following Friday. Then I waited. It took 2 weeks. I was sitting in a motel room in New Liskeard on a Wednesday evening, watching the camera feed on my phone, when a white cargo van pulled into my driveway at 6:22 in the evening. I watched a man get out of the driver's side. He was maybe 30, heavy build, work jacket. He walked up to the side of the house where the lockbox used to be, crouched down and started feeling around the fence post with his hand. He looked for the lockbox for about 45 seconds. Then he stood up, looked around, and got back in the van. I had it all on video. I called the non-emergency line and reported it. Gave them the footage, gave them a description of the van. A constable called me back the next day. They'd run the plates. The van was registered to a small auto repair operation. Not a real shop, nothing with a commercial address, just a numbered company registered to a home address in the valley. It took them another few weeks to build enough to act on it. I won't pretend I understood all the details. But from what the constable eventually explained to me, the person who had my brother's key, how they'd gotten it was still unclear. Whether they found it or were given it or something had been using my garage as an informal repair space. No overhead, no insurance, no HST. Just a free facility paid for by someone else's absence. They were doing work on vehicles for cash, telling clients they had a private shop, charging enough to make it worthwhile. The tires in the corner were waiting for a customer pickup. The creeper belonged to whoever was running the operation. The oil stains were from at least a dozen jobs. The man on the camera, a guy I'll call the operator, was not someone I'd ever met in my life. He had no connection to me personally. He'd gotten access to my key through what turned out to be a chain of 3 or 4 people, including a cousin of my brother's former co-worker, which is such a thin thread of association that it still seems almost impossible. But that's how these things apparently work. A key goes missing. Someone finds it or lifts it. Someone else sees an opportunity. Word gets around quietly. A house that's empty 5 days a week becomes a free asset for whoever gets there first. I don't know how long it would have continued if Beverly hadn't called me. I had a conversation with her after it was resolved. I brought her a box of chocolates from a place downtown, which felt inadequate, but she accepted them graciously. She told me she'd been watching the trucks for a while before she finally decided to call, because she kept thinking she must be misreading the situation. She didn't want to seem like she was prying. I almost didn't call, she said. I kept telling myself it wasn't my business. I told her I was grateful she'd decided it was. There are a few things I know now that I wish I'd known earlier. The lockbox is the obvious one. A lockbox with a static code that hasn't changed in years is not security. It's a courtesy that anyone with a little patience can figure out. I thought because I lived alone, because nobody particularly cared about my house, because I wasn't wealthy or interesting, that I wasn't a target. But that's not how it works. Empty houses aren't targeted because of what's inside them. They're targeted because of what isn't, which is anyone paying attention. I also looked at my hydro bill after the fact. 2 months prior, my usage had spiked by about $60. The month before that, it was up by $40. I'd noticed both times and told myself I'd forgotten to turn off the garage space heater before a trip. I actually convinced myself of that twice, because it was easier than the alternative. Check your bills. Seriously. If something is consistently off by even a small amount, ask yourself why. The camera footage was eventually used as part of the case. I was told charges were pursued, though I never attended anything in court, and the constable's updates to me dried up after a certain point, which I'm told is normal. The 4 tires that had been left in my garage were cataloged as evidence, and I never saw them again, which is fine. I didn't want them. I still worked the same territory. Still out 4 or 5 nights a week. Still coming home on Friday to a house that's been quiet all week. But it doesn't feel the same as it used to, and I'm not sure whether that's a bad thing. I'm more careful now. I check the camera before I leave the parking lot of wherever I'm stopping. I check it before I go to sleep. I know the difference between the shadow my spruce tree throws at 9 p.m. and what it looks like when something's moved near the garage. I think about that lockbox a lot. A small metal box with a 4-digit code that I'd stopped thinking about years ago. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a break-in. Nobody kicked down my door or smashed a window. They just found a door I'd left unlocked without realizing it, and they walked right in. Beverly waves at me now when she sees my truck pull in on Fridays. I always wave back. I check the cameras every time.